Las Vegas didn't just rise out of the desert on glitz and dreams, it rose on corruption, silence, and blood money. And it didn't happen in secret. The federal government, the city of Los Angeles, and law enforcement at every level watched it unfold in real time and let it happen. The blueprint wasn't drawn by architects, it was drawn by mobsters who saw Las Vegas not as a city, but as an opportunity. An opportunity to launder money, control labor unions, skim profits, and turn an isolated strip of desert into their personal cash machine. The government didn't stop it. In many ways, they cleared the path. This story isn't about one corrupt deal. It's about how LA helped midwife the birth of modern Las Vegas, and how the mob used America's silence to build an empire. To understand how this happened, you've got to look at the timing. The 1930s and 1940s were a turning point. Gambling was legalized in Nevada in 1931, but back then Vegas was still a nothing town with dusty roads, a few bars, and some slot machines in smoky corners. But then something changed. Construction of the Hoover Dam brought cheap, abundant electricity. The completion of the LA to Vegas rail line and highway meant people could get there easily. And when World War II ended, returning soldiers were looking to blow off steam. All the right ingredients were there. But what Vegas needed was organization. Not just business people, but people who could move large amounts of cash, operate outside the law, and control what happened on the ground. That's where LA came in. And that's where the mob stepped in. By the early 1940s, LA was crawling with organized crime. You had the Chicago Outfit, the New York Five Families, and the Jewish mob all operating out of Los Angeles. Meyer Lansky, Mo Sedway, Gus Greenbaum, Mickey Cohen. All of them either lived in LA or had crews working the city. They weren't just street-level guys. They were plugged into Hollywood, the unions, the cops, and even City Hall. LA was like a buffet table of corruption, and these guys ate first. They used their influence to launder money through real estate deals and nightclub ventures. But Vegas, that was the real prize. The desert offered something LA couldn't. Control. No zoning boards, no nosy reporters, no rival gangs claiming territory. And most importantly, no serious police force to get in the way. Bugsy Siegel gets a lot of the credit, or blame, for the rise of Las Vegas. And while he wasn't the first mobster to see the potential, he was definitely the flashiest. Bugsy had been running rackets in LA for years, acting as the West Coast enforcer for the East Coast mob. But when he saw Las Vegas, he didn't just see gambling, he saw Hollywood-style glamour. He wanted Vegas to be the luxury capital of the desert. So, with money funneled from the mob's drug trade, prostitution rings, and extortion rackets, he started building the Flamingo Hotel. He blew through $6 million, 3 times over budget, installing imported marble, Parisian chandeliers, and hand-woven rugs. The mob was furious, but when the Flamingo finally opened, they realized something. Bugsy had changed the game. Vegas wasn't just profitable, it was scalable. After Bugsy's murder in 1947, most likely ordered by his own partners, the mob didn't pull out. They doubled down, they kept building. The Sands, the Sahara, the Desert Inn, all mobbed up. And where did the financing come from? Not from banks, not from investors. It came from the Teamsters Union Pension Fund, which was being run like a private ATM by Jimmy Hoffa. Hoffa funneled hundreds of millions into Vegas construction projects with almost no oversight. If a mob family wanted to build a new casino, they called Hoffa. If they needed laborers, they called Hoffa. If they needed the city inspectors to look the other way, they made a call to LA. The entire machine ran on favors, fear, and envelopes full of cash. And the government, they knew. Of course they knew. There were Senate hearings in the early 1950s, FBI reports, IRS investigations. But every time someone got close, the trail went cold. Files got buried, witnesses disappeared, judges got bought. J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, famously refused to even acknowledge the existence of the mafia until the late 1950s. Why? Because the FBI had its own relationships. Some say Hoover was being blackmailed. Others say he just didn't want to admit how deep the problem ran. Whatever the truth, one thing's clear: Las Vegas was built during a time when federal silence was more dangerous than federal action. Even when laws were created to supposedly regulate casinos, like Nevada's 1955 law requiring license approvals for shareholders, they were so poorly written that they did the opposite. They shut out legitimate corporations while creating loopholes for mob frontmen. Guys who'd never set foot in the casino floor were listed as consultants or contractors, so they wouldn't need a license. Regulators would rubber stamp applications without looking into where the money came from, and everyone made money, so nobody asked questions. It wasn't until the 1960s, when Howard Hughes came to town, that things began to shift. Hughes was rich, eccentric, and clean. He started buying casinos, paying in full, all above board. He didn't want to deal with the mob, and for the first time, the state saw a future where Vegas didn't have to be a crime syndicate's playpen. In 1969, Nevada passed the Corporate Gaming Act, allowing big companies to buy into casinos without every shareholder needing a background check. That was the beginning of the end for the mob in Vegas, but it didn't happen overnight. They still controlled parts of the city into the 1980s. The legacy of that era still haunts Las Vegas. People think of it as Sin City, but few realize how systemic the sins really were. This wasn't a few bribes and shady deals. It was a government-endorsed pipeline that flowed from Los Angeles straight into the heart of Nevada. It was built with stolen pension funds, dirty money from LA drug rings, and political corruption that stretched from City Hall to Capitol Hill. And it worked for decades because the people in power wanted it to work. They weren't incompetent. They were complicit. Even today, if you walk into certain casinos, you'll find little tributes to that era. Mob museums, vintage photos, nods to the past. But behind the nostalgia is a darker truth. Las Vegas was built by criminals, enabled by silence, and sustained by an entire network of LA corruption that never paid a price. The city of neon lights and jackpots didn't just rise out of nowhere. It was carved out of complicity, one envelope and one handshake at a time.